Well, hello everyone. It is Friday the 14th of October 2022. I am Dale Delbridge, Benchmark Realty, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. This is your status chat. We have a long show. Let's get with it. If you like this content, please go to calldeltosell.com, find the tab that says on YouTube, click it, and it'll open up a page of QR codes. There you can use a smartphone to scan and get to the YouTube page, or you can just mouse over and click it on a PC. There you'll be able to subscribe to this little button over here and click the notification bell so that YouTube will notify you when each Friday's blog has been uploaded. Thank you. There's one cause for inflation. It's solely and totally related to the money supply. Now, we do have prices of things that go up that isn't attributable to inflation. We call those cost of living. Those are influenced by supply and demand. Well, I had a concept presented to me, which I look at and I say, well, I don't know that I totally agree with that assessment. It has a basis in fact and a rationality to it, but we're going to examine it today. In fact, we're going to continue our examination of macroeconomics, the world, and all things therein contained as it relates to money and buying houses, buying and selling houses. So let's look at this particular picture I have pulled up here. Obviously, this is from Trading Economics. This is the M1 money supply. And if you followed me for any length of time, I've told you that right here at the election, when the Democrats seized control of the government, they started printing money. Money comes out of the House, approved by the Senate, not vetoed by the president. It gets turned into money in the money supply. Now, I use the M1 because it's narrow money. Normally, when people look at inflation by the money supply, they'll use either M1 or M2, but the M0 and M1 are narrow money. So I think it more closely reflects what's actually out there circulating. And if you think about the V, the velocity of money, in the macro videos that I've done, that's available on the 22nd. You want to look at Home and Land and watch that particular video because I explain through macroeconomics and microeconomics the dead weight loss and other things that really it's not beyond anyone's understanding. It's just not normal conversation that most of us have, but I've got a video for you to watch there. But we definitely see, without any kind of argument, this is not being political. We see this as fact. We see that if I hadn't have already trimmed the scale to 1970, we operated the entire United States through the history of its creation, worked off of less than $4 trillion. And then boom, right after they get control of the government, we've got now over $20 trillion. That's going to be inflationary because that's what inflation is. Money issue. Money chasing the same output. Okay, so let's see what the effect is on prices, because that was the theory, was that we have more money out there. It causes inflation, and the increase in pricing is due to this devaluation of the dollar. And we see that we don't have curves that look alike. They sort of look-ish the same, but what we see that we must definitely have some other factors affecting us other than the money supply, because the money supply is flat relatively through this period of time, and we can definitely see a slope on this line until about 2000 and 2003 and 4, when bad fiscal policy, bad banking regulation hit, and people started going nuts with the spending, and then we had our correction. And we know that it is the crash of 2008. We shot past it a little bit. It was about a 2-year. I think it goes to about 210, a little bit further. You can see from here, home prices stayed flat for about 4 years. But we see it's not a single event. We're talking about a 14-year series of events that got us here. So everything was good. We didn't notice it right off the bat. Warning sign, peak, a problem. And then we crash and correct. And we were pretty steady since then, all the way up. You notice this little sawtooth. This is the seasonality of the sales between the green season and the lean season. Okay, the lean season is when it's cold and gray and we stay in all day, and the green season is when we have houses that must be seen. So we have the green to the lean, and we just see that cycle off and on. That's a normal, healthy market reaction. Until 2020, and COVID and the illegal lockdowns that we had, the pent-up demand is, I think, what actually caused this. Because we saw that with toilet paper. It's a pretty easy thing to think about. Toilet paper is worth a certain amount of money. If the cost of growing trees goes up or harvesting goes up, we can expect it to make its way into the manufacturing, and the manufacturing rolled toilet paper. But while we saw a toilet paper spike was a human reaction to a supply and demand. We panicked and people bought a whole lot of it. Well, when we pin up basically a year's worth of home sales and we uncoiled that spring and let them go, suddenly we had much more buyers for the same amount of stock, basically, that we could expect it had the government not interfered with the unconstitutional lockdown. And that created this buying spree, this panic and whatever going up, and it continues to go up. Well, what else do we have going on? Well, I don't know if I've mentioned this.
Inflation is not necessarily a bad word. It's like recession is not necessarily a bad word. A little bit of inflation is not bad. It's like weight loss. A little bit of weight loss over a period of time is not a bad thing. It's kind of healthy. When does it become unhealthy? If you see an absolute rapid and sudden weight loss, it may be a sign that there's a malignant cancer rolling around within you. And this is not a good sign. It should be responded to early, not delayed and not denied, but responded to early. And we see that we saw everything going up. People were kind of happy during this period, weren't they? All right, home values are going up. But let me explain it. Why a little bit of inflation is not too bad is, say I buy a house for $500,000. My debt is written for $500,000. $500,000 is the debt which I owe. My house is worth, assuming that there's nothing really ugly in the market, it's worth $500,000. Now what happens if we water down the value of the money with inflation by printing a bunch of money? Say if I'm heavily debt laden and I print a bunch of money right here, what happens? My dollar value goes down to maybe, let's say it goes down to 80%. So now my house is still worth $500,000. My debt says $500,000, but the dollars I have to pay back are $500,000, but they're only worth 80 cents. So now I actually, in a sense, gained 20 cents on the dollar because somebody printed a bunch of money. Now that feels good for a while until we have to replace that house, because houses are built with what? I hate to be so simple, but houses are built with stuff, and they're filled with stuff. And when the cost of stuff goes up, the cost of a house will go up. And so now my replacement house comes back and it bites me on the bottom, doesn't it? Because now I have to pay the price for my free 20 cents that I just got. Now I have to pay it back with dollars that don't buy as much. And that's where we get caught in this cycle of nothing is free. Printing a bunch of money, there's never a justification for printing a bunch of money. Printing a little bit of money, maybe if we can increase output. Printing a bunch of money will lead to inflation, and we may see hyperinflation of the Robert Mugabe Zimbabwe crash, where the whole currency crashed. I don't think we're going to have that, hopefully, because we have a more complex economy than they did in Zimbabwe. But go back to the home prices. We see home prices cyclic as nature, no cyclic nature in the money supply, but we see it spike through some unnatural cause, and we see a natural correction, and then we're back off to the races again. Okay, so that makes sense to me in that standpoint. Now let's look at our 30-year mortgages. Well, our 30-year mortgages kind of go absent the prices. And that's really one of the problems that we've got ourselves into as a nation, because when things were very expensive, our prices stayed kind of low, and they came up, and they're up more than they've ever been before. And the price of money went down and down and down and down till it's just beginning to correct. So what did that allow us to do? Cheaper money let us buy a more expensive house. Cheaper money, more expensive house. More expensive money, cheaper house. Okay? This is real common sense. So what's happened now, if we have the cost of money spike, we're going to have a real problem with prices, because we're not going to have people demand them. And demand, remember, demand is not desire. Desire is want. Demand is people who want and are willing to buy and can afford to buy. So when the cost of money spikes up, this is going to have a corrective effect on the price of homes. So if the price of homes is not really all that sensitive, if it's more sensitive to the price of money, then we can see what does inflation do, because inflation affects the price of money. Well, let's go to this next one. How many times have you heard the story is not necessarily incorrect, but it's just not accurate. Housing starts. Prices are going up because we didn't build enough houses. Well, that's just not true. I don't think it stands an intellectual test, does it? Because back here we were slowly having our prices go up till something happened, and abnormal high correction. A little bit overshoot, and we get a little sharper rise here, but we're healthy through these years. What happened? We have high mortgage rates here, or high starts here, down, high, down, because building is expensive, and it ties up a lot of resources, and so people are very sensitive to it. Housing starts are sensitive to it, but we don't see the same shape, do we? The reality is we cannot have too few housing starts, because if we have a shortage, the shortage itself pushes to a new equilibrium price, and that can elevate the prices some, but it can also lead to dropping them if we have a surplus. But here we see the starts. We did build a number. We're still building a number. And yet, during this time period between 2010 and 2000, well, 2010 and 2005, we see a tremendous drop. in 2005 and 2010. This is during this period when we're correcting. So we were growing when we were positive. We were down when we were. So it tracks. But what is all this mess that wasn't back here? Let's go to our next slide. So here's our inflation. We could say, because we have this nice tall spike, that this one and this one are related. They have about the same time frame, 2000 to now and 2000 to now. Steady, pretty much. Inflation rate, plus or minus, all the way through from about the 1980 correction. So here we have the build steady all the way to right here, the 1980 correction. Wait a minute. We're still going. Here we are, somewhere around here. Did you see something that's missing right there? We're missing these spikes. So the inflation rate, obviously, nothing's immune from inflation, but it didn't really have an effect here on the prices. So it must have affected something, right? Well, it sure did. Sale of existing homes. See how much more jagged that is? There we go. That's our answer. Our prices are much more steady than the volume that we have, that we sell. So they are related. They're not locked at the hip. However, if we go back to the sales price, that's a lot more uniform in their escalation over time, even though our inflation rate isn't. You would think that it would add to it and just kind of keep stacking pennies on top of the stack, but we actually see that the home sale volume is much more volatile associated with the inflation rate. And if we can pull that back off to get the mortgage rates, we see that the mortgage rates really weren't all that drastically changing, but it does have another effect. We bought too expensive of a home. When the money was cheap, we bought very expensive homes that we may not be able to afford when the rates spike. Get back where we were, 70-year oil prices. I bring this to you because they show you a good job of showing you the recession. Again, expansion is good, but you will have to have recession. It's the natural order of things. And here, if we have a good, healthy economy, we have short recessions, long expansions. Short recession, long expansion. That helps us get our climb. Short expansion, short recession, long expansion, short expansion, long expansion, short recession, and so on. This one was a bad one, right here in the 1980s. That's what we're seeing right about here. That's when the mortgage rates went so sky high, when the inflation rate went sky high. Everything that should be down was up, and everything that was up should be down. So there where we are at this point. Now, two things happened, which is from 1970, which is right here, to 1980. Two bad things happened. 1971, we went off the gold standard. Look what happened to oil prices. It shot up dramatically. It went from somewhere around $21 a barrel to over $60 a barrel. Very, very sensitive commodity market because it wasn't backed with anything. It was fiat money. But when we look at, let me see if I can get it on the right-hand side. There we go. Now I got it on the right-hand side. We see we went off the gold standard in 1971. We spiked oil prices. So this is a supply and demand cost. This is not pure actual money inflation, is it? This is a cost of living increase. We feel it as inflation. It's not classic inflation. It's an increase in price level. Look at 1970. Did you see any abuse of the fiat money in 1970? Do you see any abuse of the fiat money in 1980? Anywhere in this time period? But yet we had two big spikes. The first one correlates to going off the gold standard, the first spike. The second spike was, of course, the big blowout in recession. Inflation jumped up, it cropped up, and we had to clamp down with high cost of money to kill off the economy, and it did so. But spiked back up about mid 1975 or so. Second drop, spiked up at peak at 1980, and there's two things that were happening here. Let's see if I have this next slide here. Yes, the 1970s saw some of the highest rates of inflation in the United States recent history. In turn, the interest rates rose to nearly 20%. Fed policy abandonment of the gold window and Keynesian economic policy, market psychology all contributed to the inflation. And all that's really just telling you is this: when we came off the gold back here, we had a big spike. That gave us fiat money. Fiat money is what the Keynesian economics is using. They want to manipulate the money supply to adjust the price level of things. But printing money causes prices to go up. Economics says you then have to correct them by a recession. How do you correct a recession? Jacking the cost of money so high that nobody can do any business. So we have a spike in interest rates. There we go. Not looking real good for the home team, is it? Well, if we go back to our prices, we see that prices tend to hold more steady than the volume of homes. So what's going to happen to correct this? I don't know. This is an expansion of the money supply, which will result in inflation, not just cost of living increases, but inflation itself. How do we counteract cost of inflation? And that is, of course, by rates. Now we're just beginning to see them. I think with that high of a spike in money supply, they're not going to be able to reel that in anytime quickly, especially at 5 times the historic level. I think we're going to see some interest rates continue to rise. So what does it all mean? It means it's never simple. It's not one single thing. I think when we get into sales and motivation, we like to tell you one part or another, blame it on high prices, because we all want answers. So we blame high price on we didn't build enough homes, when we know economically that's impossible. The shortage of homes just creates a new high, and that may make prices go up over a period of time. But this was an expansion over a decade, well over a decade. And we saw that going. Market forces will tell us that they would have started building more homes, they'd have caught up. Except that everybody was happy on both sides of the question. Supply and producers and purchasers were happy at that price level, and the price went up. What enabled that price to go up so abnormally high was cheap money, was the very low rates. And what people do is they buy to the limit of the mortgage that they can hold. And that caused prices to go up. It caused more fancy houses to be built up with more accoutrement, with more things in it that people want. And now we're having a problem with the inflation going up to counteract this thing that happened way late, that happened in 2020. Not that happened in 2008 through those years. It happened 2020 that we've printed all this massive amount of money. And we're going to pay for that probably for several years. So now is a good time to buy. You just need to get in before the rates go even further, and before inflation goes even higher, and before things get harder and harder to find. Because that's just the way the market is. You see that it is cyclic, and you know what? You know we're going to go into a cool down period just because winter's coming. Now may be your time to get with it. Hello, I'm Del Delbridge of Benchmark Realty, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. If you are currently unrepresented and would like to know how to compare up to 3 properties side by side and room by room, then go over to my new YouTube channel. Call Del to sell. That's 1 L and Del, no spaces. Watch the demo on Real Scout, and then call me and we'll set up your exclusive ad-free account today. Last week, 10/7/22, we had 18,089 opportunities in Real Scout system. That was an increase over the previous period. We had 3772 in the under contract, still showing that decrease over the previous period, and the ratio continued its 1% drop each week. It's now down to 21% at that point. This week, 10/14/22, we had 18,574 opportunities. That's an increase over the previous period. 3676 in the under contract, still showing this a decrease over the previous period, and the integer level ratio between the two of them dropped another percentage point. We're down to 20% between the two. So we appreciate you watching, and have a good weekend.